Welcome back to DisruptWell Summit 2020. We're going to turn our attention to the dark web. Joining us in person today is Justice Daniel J. Crothers, who has served on the North Dakota Supreme Court in Bismarck since June 2005. Prior to taking the bench, he was a prosecutor, commercial litigator, a college instructor, and a legal and judicial educator. Joining us remotely is Mark Lanterman. He is the Chief Technology Officer of Computer Forensic Services. Before entering the private sector, he was a member of the U.S. Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force. Mark has 28 years of security and forensic experience and has testified in over 2,000 cases. Mike Seminary will moderate this question and answer period following this discussion. I encourage you all to submit questions during the chat, either as the discussion is going on or right afterward. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you for having us. The title of this talk is Pandemic Problems and Hackers Too. I guess we were in a little bit of a dark mood when we came up with the title. We should have added the positive and progress. It really should have said pandemic, problems, progress, and hackers too. And I think that'll be the theme of what you're going to hear today. Just as a little bit of background, Mr. Lanterman and I have been teaching together for about 10 years. We have taught judges and lawyers all over the country, primarily in the area of legal and judicial ethics. There's a couple reasons for us being invited back more than once occasionally, and that is, first of all, Mark is really good, and so I'll try not to take a bunch of his time. Secondly, the rules of professional conduct that govern lawyers and judges require as one of its fundamental principles that lawyers and judges be competent. And there's a comment to that rule on competency that says this: to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice. And then these 9 words that Mark and I just love, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. Mike Seminary knows that I have a passion for technology and courts and how it works together, and we all come to our daily work and we all come to our outreach through a certain prism, and my prism, of course, is lawyer and judicial ethics, lawyer and judicial interaction, and in particular for this event and this topic, lawyer and judicial competency, keeping in mind the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about where we are, where we've been, and where we might be going in the courts, all the while hoping to give a lot of time for Mark to get to the substance of the fun stuff. So, our start point, I'm talking about law and judges, and law and judges are viewed as traditional. And as a third branch of government, as one of the pillars of our government, perhaps courts should not be quick to change. Perhaps courts should not be whimsical. But at the same time, I think courts have an obligation to pay attention to changes that are occurring in society, and that the courts must operate in a manner to keep up with those changes. And I'm not sure, at least prior to 2020, we were doing that all that well. And so what happened prior to the pandemic? Well, if you looked around, you saw courts that went from 2000 to the next 10 years widely used electronic filing. And so it was no longer necessary for the post office to deliver, or a third-party mailing service to deliver, or to somebody to physically go to a courthouse and file papers. Almost all of that is done online electronically. And in the courts world, that was a big change. And frankly, after about 2010, technologically, things tended to slow down. Yes, there would be some innovation, but it was small. Most of the innovation came from the form of what a few people would do around nibbling around the edges. So in a civil proceeding, if a doctor was going to testify, perhaps that doctor's testimony would be presented by video, sometimes live, usually recorded. Occasionally, and very occasionally, a court would allow live testimony presented, testimony presented live in the courtroom by audio-visual means. And that was usually reserved to a doctor testifying in an injury case or a situation where some professional had limited availability or for some reason could not travel. But it was the rare exception. And then there were these, what I will kindly and respectfully call geeks, the technology geeks that were in the field of law that would dabble. And we were dabbling with, well, I don't have the technical proficiency, I have the curiosity. So I will say they were dabbling with things like artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence could be used to promote and expedite the civil discovery process where you're going through thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of documents. And in my era of litigating, that meant people, us, sitting down, reading every page of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of documents. And as we know, with word processing, with electronic means, you can produce a lot of documents that need to be read in civil discovery. There are some advances in what electronic or artificial intelligence is being used in that field. There are some other areas that I'll wait and see if we get into talking about artificial intelligence. But the bottom line is, up until the pandemic, little was happening. And then, as we know, came January, where we heard that China was having health problems. February, where we heard it has gone into Europe, and perhaps the United States had pockets. And then into March, and by mid-March, things closed down completely. And included in those things that closed down almost completely were the courts. And so my court, the North Dakota Supreme Court, we dispersed most of our staff, and the justices worked remotely, or at least separately. And that was something that we had never done. Most appellate courts have never done that. But within 10 days, my court was fully functioning. We were online hearing oral arguments. And since March 23rd, Monday, March 23rd of 2020, we have not missed a beat. We have heard every case that is assigned. We have decided every case that has come up. We have had oral arguments in somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 cases since then, and we are completely functioning. But before that date, nobody had, well, we'd thought about it, we'd discussed it, but nobody had any interest in having remote proceedings. Our trial courts are much the same, except the trial courts in North Dakota, like a trial court anywhere else, handles a full-scale, human relation, retail, open access business. And that entire court process depends on people coming into a courtroom, resolving their matter before a judge or a jury, and then leaving the courthouse. It is human contact intensive. But again, in the middle of March, that stopped. And courts in many parts of the country and in courts in some parts of North Dakota slowed down or ceased operation when the courthouses closed. But we have examples of where they did not, and I'll cite just a few of them. We have a judge in Fargo who, we have judges across the state who stepped up, and let me start with that. Most of our judges kept on working in some capacity, and while I know they all started working in some capacity, most of them got online and started moving their cases remotely. The example I'm giving is just one of those. And this particular judge had a positive COVID case within her family. She could not go to work. She couldn't leave her home. They were quarantined. And so she set up shop there with her computer equipment. And in a period of 3 days, handled over 170 cases from her home. Those are 170 cases that would have stopped, and probably stopped indefinitely. But she handled everything she could have done in the courtroom, in those proceedings, from her home. We have other cases. We have another judge in the central part of the state. Her chambers are in Jamestown. She handles a lot of mental health cases because of the state hospital in Jamestown. And she was of the opinion that moving, well, first of all, the state hospital didn't want patients coming in and out. And so they restricted the movement of patients. Secondly, the movement of patients is labor intensive. it's human contact intensive. Normally, a person who is in need of treatment that goes to the state hospital for a temporary evaluation goes there for up to 72 hours. Usually it's less. After that, they are entitled to a hearing, and if they have a hearing, the sheriff would come get them from the home county, transport them back to their home county, have a hearing, and then if they were deemed in need of continuing treatment, they would go back to the state hospital. This was human contact intensive, it was disruptive to treatment of the person needing treatment, and it required the judge to be in that traditional courtroom setting. Well, Judge Sherry Clark in Jamestown said, we can do this remotely. We need to do it remotely because facilities are closed. We need to do it remotely because the state hospital doesn't want, or in some cases will not allow us to come and go. And so she set up a process for handling these cases remotely. That process will not go away when COVID-19 is behind us. The process for the judge in Fargo who was had the family contact, that will not go away because we know judges are unavailable, and we know one other thing, and the public is starting to accept this. We know that if the courts, and everyone else, but if the courts will meet people where they live, the people, the public, the constituents, the citizens will more readily accept what we are doing, and they will more readily accept the system in which they have been required to function, either involuntarily or voluntarily by bringing a case. And so what are we seeing going forward? Well, I think we are seeing opportunity that was visited on us by the pandemic. None of us would have wanted this, and we of course are all devastated by the injury and loss we're seeing around us, in both economic and on a human scale. But we are seeing positive movements, and we are seeing public acceptance of doing things differently. And so what do I see going forward? Well, I see more people in the court system and elsewhere interested in accepting a different way of doing things. And this is, in my view, not just significant, this is monumental, because courts have operated the same for centuries, and we have changed how we do business in months. And this will have some legs. And so it is in part owing to folks like you who are attending and organizations like DisruptWell that ask us to think differently and to approach things differently. But we have a circumstance here that is helping us live differently. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. And as a segue into Mr. Lanterman's piece, I am going to say that what I view as the connection between what I'm talking about and what Mr. Lanterman is talking about is whether you are a court or a business or anyone else, as the use of technology rises, as the convenience of the transmission rises, the insecurity, or at least potential insecurity, of the information you're handling also rises. And that's what Mark and I teach when we go out and teach to judges and lawyers. We talk about advantages, but we also talk about precautions. And part of the learning about precautions is hearing from people like Mr. Lanterman, who tells us what the bad actors are up to, what they are trying to do, because anytime they can monetize our information, there will be a desire for the bad actors to try get at our information. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Mr. Lanterman, and after he's completed, we welcome any questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. And first, I'd like to thank DisruptWell for the opportunity to join you, albeit remotely. I hope one day soon I'll be able to join you in person. As you heard, I've had the great experience of teaching with Justice Crothers now for, I think he said 10 years. It's making me feel pretty old today, though. But one thing that I can say is that every time we do get together for one of these sessions, I always learn something new from him. So it's always been such a great experience and a real testimony to his technological skill set. So I'm going to share my screen with you because I have a few slides that I would like to walk you through and talk to you about. So the first thing, though, that I want to share with you is my all-time favorite photograph. I was really honored a few years ago. I was asked to speak at one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in the country. It was held in New York City. We had about 3,500 attendees, and I show up and I eventually find the registration desk and I go to pick up my name tag and there's no one sitting there. So I have an unattended laptop at a cybersecurity conference. And I look down, I mean, I can't believe this. And I look down and I see something that gets my attention and I think I have to get a picture of this. At one of the largest cybersecurity conferences in the country, this slide became the opening slide of my keynote address. I've not been asked to return, but that's okay.
But it was really fun.
The point is, and we all need to remember this, the point is, and I hate to quote an old, not great TV show, but we are the weakest links. Your organizations can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, on technology security, security personnel. And all it takes is for one of us to have a momentary lapse of thought and become lazy and do something like this. Okay, you need to remember that hackers need our help, and sometimes we give it to them, kind of like here. But I will confess that this is now the password for all of my online bank accounts, and the nice thing about it is I only have to change it once a year. 2016, 2017, 2018. But hackers need our help. And sometimes we give it to them voluntarily, like here, or they need to trick us into helping them. So in 2019, 4 of the top 10 law firms in Minneapolis, we're based in Minneapolis, 4 of the top 10 law firms retained our company because the law firms had been victims of phishing attacks. And phishing attacks, these are those scam emails that tend to fill up our inboxes every day, and hopefully you just delete them. But we saw two separate phishing attacks against these law firms. The first was an email purportedly from the managing partner, the boss, to HR. Hey, HR, I need all W-2 information for all of our employees right away. Thank you. And the HR person sees the email, and think about it. Normally, when you get an email, you see the name, you hit reply, and then in this case, the HR person attached a spreadsheet with all W-2 information. So what does that include? Names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, how much you make, so I know which one of you I want to commit fraud against. What the problem is that the HR manager didn't look at the email address that was associated with this request. So instead of sending all of that information to managing partner at lawfirm.com, she sent it to criminal@hacker.com. Not too long ago, I received an email from the Minnesota State Police, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, stating that a registered sex offender has recently moved into your neighborhood to see who it is and to see what steps you can take to protect your children. Click here. Well, the state police, neither in Minnesota nor in North Dakota send out emails like that. But one of my favorite phishing examples is this email. And it's an email that is purportedly from Gmail. Subject line is, someone has your password. Hi, so-and-so. Someone just used your password to try to sign into your Google account. It happened on Saturday. We here at Google, we are so savvy, we're so techie that we log the IP address and we track the bad guys back to the Ukraine. And, you know, we all know everyone in the Ukraine is a hacker, right? But it's okay because we here at Google, we stop these criminals from accessing your data, from accessing your client's data, perhaps. We stopped these criminals in their tracks. We saved your bacon. But now you should change your password immediately. To do so, click here. Now, hopefully after today, none of you will fall for this. But the reason why this happens to be my favorite example is because of the identity of the recipient. The recipient of this email was John Podesta. Now, you may remember Mr. Podesta. He used to hold the title of Chief of Staff to Hillary Clinton. This is the email that resulted in the leak of Clinton campaign emails to WikiLeaks. This is the email. This is the email that arguably influenced a US presidential election. And as though that wasn't bad enough, his password was password. Really? But it had a capital P, so I guess that made it a little more secure. But just remember, these emails are not going away anytime soon because they make criminals a lot of money. Just outside of Minneapolis, there is a very successful privately held pharmaceutical company. Their chief executive officer, the CEO, travels to China. He's presenting at a pharmaceutical trade conference. While the CEO is in China, the company is proud of their chief, so they announce it on their webpage. Our CEO is in China. So now the world knows it. While the CEO is in China, the CEO sends an email to the company's chief financial officer, CFO. Hey, dear CFO, I'm in China. Conference is going great. Everything is just fantastic, a great experience. Hey, CFO, I've come across a great opportunity for us. I have discovered a startup pharmaceutical company here in China that is doing research at least 5 years ahead of anything we have ever seen. And I've had great discussions with them. CFO, you are the only person at the company whom I can trust with this information. So tell no one, but we are going to acquire this company. CFO, I need you to immediately wire $52 million to this account in China immediately. I will give you all of the details when I return to the company in 10 days. Now, 10 days is an eternity in the life of a wire transfer. 10 minutes is an eternity in the life of a wire transfer. 10 days go by, the CEO returns to the company. Hey, boss, how was the conference? Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. Hey, boss, when do you want to talk about that acquisition? What acquisition? Gulp. You know, the acquisition that you told me to wire $52 million to close on 10 days ago? You did what? You are fired. Now, you may think, oh, that's a horrible story. It couldn't get any worse. Well, it does get worse. The company then decides to sue their bank. And what happens when you sue? Well, when you sue, everything becomes public. So now the world knows you're an idiot who wired $52 million because you got a couple of emails. The company's position was, bank, you're a sophisticated financial institution. You should have known that this was fraud. The bank's position, which I happen to agree with, was, but you used to be the CFO. You should have known that this was fraud. So the point is, if you are asked for anything of value, whether that's data like W-2 information or perhaps wire transfer information, or maybe you're asked to send $52 million somewhere, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and confirm that. You see, technology has made our lives much more efficient, and we can get through our tasks, our daily to-do list very quickly. Click, 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 done. And the problem with that level of efficiency is sometimes we're not perhaps reading these emails as carefully as we should. Perhaps we're not putting thought into what we're being told. So pick up the phone. If you have a wire transfer instruction that gets changed right before closing on your mortgage, pick up the phone and verify this. If that CFO had simply picked up the phone and called his boss, hey boss, $52 million, that's a lot of money. I just want to make sure that the commas are in the right place. If that CFO had picked up the phone, he would be a hero today instead of working the drive-through at Arby's. And they don't even let him work the register. They keep him away from the money. So pick up the phone. Remember the old saying, trust with verification. Pick up the phone and confirm.
Mark, can I interrupt a moment?
Please do.
How does this fit in with ransomware? Because I noticed in the news this morning that there are 2 ransomware attacks over the weekend that are significant and still being investigated. One has shut down a major health care organization, and the other has to do with a large government contractor.
Yeah, a very large government contractor. And thank you for the introduction to my next topic. So as you can see,
we haven't rehearsed this part.
Yeah, as you can see on this slide, I was in Florida last year, and I saw this on the local CBS affiliate. Florida City paid $600,000 to hackers who seized its computer system via ransomware. Now, I'll tell you, over the past 3 years, almost every single cyber breach that our firm has investigated, we've traced it back to email. These attacks they're constantly coming via email. And as you can see at the bottom screenshot, the hackers apparently got into the city system when an employee clicked on an email link that allowed them to upload malware. They technically downloaded the malware. These attacks are very successful, and they are making criminals a lot of money. So to kind of round out my portion of this, I thought that I would share with you a real investigation that I worked on, I guess it was a little more than a year ago now. So what you're seeing, we have a city in northern Minnesota who has a close relationship with the state of Minnesota. They work back and forth looking to identify grant money. And one day the city employee receives this email from her counterpart with the state of Minnesota. Now, the city employee happens to be the HR director and finance manager for the city. And she gets this email from a known counterpart, a colleague at the state of Minnesota. Subject line is reminder invoice. There's an attachment. From the name of the attachment, it appears as though we can safely assume that this is a Word document based on the file extension .doc. And the email reads, Good morning. Please find attached invoice that was missing. I can confirm that $50,956 has been received. Thanks and best regards. So the finance manager gets this email, has no idea what it's about. And like you and I would do, the first thing she does is she double clicks on the Word document and opens the Word document. When she does that, she gets an error message. And I'm going to show you that error message here in a second. What she doesn't realize is, what she can't see is she is downloading malware, bad software. And in this case, this malware allowed hackers, allowed cyber criminals to take control of her computer without her knowing it. This employee, because she sees this error message that I'll show you, she took this email and forwarded it to all 70 coworkers at City Hall. I'm having trouble reading this Word document. Can someone give me a hand? By doing that, this employee single-handedly infected over 70 computers at that city. The computer is now compromised. The entire city network is compromised. 5.5 months go by, and then the criminals decide to strike. On a Wednesday afternoon, a criminal posing as the finance manager sends an email as the finance manager to their bank. Hey, we have a new payroll processing service. Instead of sending payroll to this account, send it to this new account, the new account being controlled by the criminals. The bank, without picking up the phone and confirming, did so. Monday morning comes by, and now HR is getting besieged with phone calls saying, where's my direct deposit? They lost about $400,000. So the state of Minnesota brought us in to assist in the investigation. And so we collected all of the computers. What you're seeing now is the desktop of the HR manager, the finance director. This is her desktop. And you can see that based on the desktop wallpaper, this is a very old version of Microsoft Windows. Not only was it an outdated operating system, it was also missing 5 years of free Windows security updates. 5 years worth. I guess free wasn't in the city's budget those years. The other thing, there was no antivirus, no anti-malware. So I thought it would be interesting. I'm going to show you a data breach live in real time. I'm going to open that Word document, and you're going to see exactly what this employee saw, and you're going to see how quickly this city became compromised and lost $400,000. On the count of three, I'm going to open this Word document. 1, 2, 3. It's an old version of Microsoft Word, and that's the error message. That's it. That is how quickly cyber attacks, how quickly data breaches occur. And this error message reads, you are attempting to open a file that was created in an earlier version of Microsoft Office. Attempting is spelled A-T-T-E-M-T-I-N-G. Vanna, I'd like to buy a consonant, please. That quickly, that city lost $400,000. The final point that I want to make to you on that case is when the city filed their insurance claim, the insurance company denied it. And the reason why they denied it is the insurance company, the position was that the city had not taken reasonable steps to protect its data, to reasonable steps to prevent something like this from happening. Old operating system, no antivirus, no anti-malware. So just remember, and my parting comment for you is just remember, you are not expected to have perfect security. There is no such thing. But you do and you should take reasonable steps to protect your data and your client's data. So thank you, and we have some time for questions.
Well, thank you, Your Honor, and Mr. Lanterman. That was wonderful information. My first question will be to Justice Crothers. Early in your presentation, you talked about AI being used to rapidly go through documents. You went from hundreds to thousands, hundreds and millions. In the case of those that are in private practice, is that being used at great lengths right now? And if it is, how is it changing the workplace with regards to the staff that would normally be doing that? What are they doing in lieu of now the technology being used to rapidly go through all that information?
Great question. I think AI is being used in the discovery context by a pretty small group of lawyers. By and large, it is a technology that's being used. Well, first of all, both Mr. Lanterman and I have co-taught courses with one of the pioneers in that field, Professor Mora. Of course, her last name slips me as I'm, help me out, Mark, Mora, little Mora.
I just call her Mora.
I mean, we all call her Mora. Anyway, this is largely being developed on an academic level. Some of the large law firms are using this in larger companies, and there are specialized firms that do that make a living out of assisting lawyers in litigation support and discovery services. They are using it, but I think if you ask lawyers in average-sized firms, and in the United States, the average-sized law firm is 5 lawyers or less. We tend to think of big law firms, but really it's small law firms. And if you look at law firms of 5 or fewer in the Midwest region, I would say virtually none are using that. Now, that said, few of those lawyers are involved in large-scale litigation. On the other hand, Mr. Lanterman's company does a little bit of litigation support, and I think, Mark, as e-discovery changed over the years, because I know in some respects, even the small cases have a lot of documents, but what's your experience, Mark? Are you seeing AI for discovery? And AI, Mike, before we leave, remind me to go back to AI on that sheet to your right, because I think there's another chapter in this AI. But Mark, what are you seeing with AI in discovery?
Yeah, so first, it's Professor Maura Grossman.
Grossman.
So I had a second to look it up. We are seeing AI being used only in the largest cases. These are cases, I have a case right now out of Kentucky in which the court ordered the use of AI, but this is a case that's valued at over $1 billion, and there are a lot of documents. In my practice, typically we are not seeing AI being used by the law firms.
But this is incremental as well, so that's AI. But technology is being used, and so there are word searches that are being done on this mass of documents, because you can digitize the information and you can search it. Where before you'd have this army of either lawyers or others who have some legal training going through looking for key information. And so it has changed the employment. It has changed the people skills or the employment pool that lawyers might have used previously. So technology is involved short of AI. AI is kind of the next step. And I mentioned that sheet beside you. It was a printout from a couple days ago. What AI is being used for, again, innovatively, is, or it might be the one that's turned over even, I guess.
Criminal recidivism and the promise of machine learning?
Right, yeah. And so what, again, it's almost on an academic level. There's some practical application. In Michigan, for instance, they are using AI to develop some tools that give parameters to estimate whether a particular criminal defendant might be amenable to being released on bail pending trial, or whether, given all of the information we know about this particular person, they are at a higher risk of reoffending or doing something between the date of the charge and the date of trial. And so they're trying to aggregate big pieces of information and use that big block of information to predict human behavior. And there's, of course, some controversy to that. And one of the controversies is our data may well be biased. And so we may be compounding a bias by creating a system that relies on that bias to make the future decisions. And so there's not only an ethical component to use of AI, but there's a practical component. What is teaching the machine? What data set is teaching the machine to make these decisions? And then where is the human interaction in that process? And so there is a whole field of study that is just breaking out on AI and the law. But there are some promising developments in terms of what artificial intelligence or machine learning can be used for to aggregate data that humans simply can't get their arms around.
Thank you. Another question. This is for you, Mark. It's a layered question, and if somebody else has a question after that, please let me know. The first layer is that a Knickerbocker base and a 335 in your rack behind you?
Yes.
Okay. The second question is, what are some other ways for us to protect ourselves when we get an email that looks so authentic? And sometimes we're pressed for time, and we have a tendency to click. What are some other red flags that you could suggest would serve us well?
Yeah, well, think before you click. And you may believe that I don't have time. I have an appointment. I gotta jump on this conference call. I'm just going to take care of this right away. And the problem, hackers know that, and they take advantage of that. Okay, and when your bank account has been cleared out, you're going to wish that you had taken the time to just pick up the phone and call the sender, the purported sender of that email. Find the time, because if you don't, you're gonna have to find the time later to clean up the mess when your bank account's been cleaned out.
It's an interesting question, because Mark, in one of our longer sessions, Mark actually has a series of slides, and the gist of his presentation is urgency. If you look at the successful hacks that his firm has investigated, many of them involve some sort of invitation to do something quickly. There is a need to quickly address something, the Podesta. There's a danger here, you better click here to investigate. And the interesting thing is a lot of companies legitimately follow up by, the message you get says, well, there's been erratic attempts to log into your account, click here. And I get that from Microsoft, and I thought, why are you doing that? I'm not supposed to click here. I'm supposed to go somewhere else and log into my account and see if there have been erratic attempts. But it all surrounds an urgency, and most of the messages that Mark puts on demonstrate, do something now. We need to address this before something bad happens.
Is there another question?
Yeah. If I could just add to that, there's always a sense of urgency, and whether it's you're closing on a deal, whether that's a home mortgage or maybe it's a business acquisition, and it's like, hey, ignore the wire transfer instructions I sent you this morning. There's been a change in plan. Use this wire instruction instead. Well, do you do that? No, you pick up the phone and you verify that. I'm involved in 2 cases right now in which millions of dollars were lost because of that. And the wire transfers were sent by lawyers holding money in escrow for their clients.
That exact thing happened to a friend of mine who's a lawyer on the East Coast. And what happened is, through malware that was put onto his computer system, the hacker was very patiently watching his emails. And he waited months, the hacker, he, she, whoever, waited months to close in on a particular transaction, and on the afternoon before closing, changed the wire transfer instructions and was successful in diverting hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it was very close to $1 million.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you. I'm a student at NDSU, and we're currently using the high flex model where we can be in class and on Zoom at the same time. I've had 2 separate instances where we've had someone come into the Zoom call and impersonate a student, and they've either displayed graphic content or wrote graphic content in our chat. And I just, from your perspective, do you have any, I guess, tips to help prevent that in the future, or know why or how that would happen?
As I mentioned, my court system, the North Dakota Supreme Court has been conducting online oral arguments since March. Our trial courts are regularly conducting online using Zoom. And for the Supreme Court, we control who gets the login information, because that's key. If you can control the login URL, you can know who is there. And for the Supreme Court, with a relatively small number of people, we can do that. And if there's somebody there by chance who shouldn't be, we simply exclude them. The trial courts is a little different matter when they're dealing with a large number of people. But they go through a process where they make everybody identify themselves. And if they cannot figure out who's calling in on a particular number or who a user is, they exclude them. And so there are measures like that. There are also features in Zoom where you can ban users if you have that happen. But usually it's because the session is not secure. So for a classroom, the professor could see who is in there and then lock the room and keep anybody from coming in from the outside. There are several different features. Some courts refuse to use Zoom, saying it's insecure. I don't agree with that. Mr. Lanterman?
Yes, thank you. It's not a problem with Zoom. It's a problem with your instructor's use of Zoom. It's operator error. With Zoom, you have a waiting room. All too often, instructors will put out a single link for anyone to use, come and join the class. And then they wonder why they have unwanted people joining. You know, every student should receive a unique link. They should all go to the waiting room, and then they should all be individually allowed into the class. And by maintaining control, by maintaining this security, this type of situation will not happen. So, you know, you heard a few months ago a number of stories about security issues with Zoom. 99% of them are operator error.
Well, let's give a big thank you to Justice Crothers and Mr. Lanterman for a very insightful presentation. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And I believe now as a transition, we have another video. It's like another of our Innovation Challenge videos. Remember, we will be voting for a People's Choice Award a little bit later. Again, thank you, Mr. Lanterman and Justice Crothers.
Thank you for having us.
BioShield is a student-led company. Our idea is a bio-based shingle that can compete in the asphalt market while also giving the customer an eco-friendly option. Roofing is something that everyone uses and everyone needs. It has to be replaced, and there will always be a market for it.
I think what is really exciting right now is they've spent over 3 semesters entering this idea in competitions, getting feedback, evolving the idea to the point now it's ready for the market.
We've really grown it to be more towards a business now.
Our product not only is a sustainable design, our testing shows that we will likely outperform asphalt, and as we continue testing, we're hoping to reaffirm that.
BioShield uses flax as its main structural component, so we're able to give back and provide more sources of income for North Dakota farmers.
The available products for roofing materials, there's not a lot of variety, and specifically using ag byproducts. So material that would either be left to rot in the field or be brought to the municipal waste facility to get rid of.
And we really want to provide people those options and to hopefully alleviate the 11 million tons of asphalt shingle sitting in landfills year after year.
If you think about North Dakota and how we look at agriculture and fields, this turns it on its head, where now we see the stuff that used to be waste could be the most valuable part of the supply chain. And when it's used to solve a massive problem like climate change by creating better building materials, you can see that this is incredibly disruptive. They're really solving a problem that not a lot of people are thinking about with a solution that very few people have thought about.
Now be a 10-minute break. We'll return at 1:15.